The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of OLOS Media or its sponsors.
OLOS Media.
This is Cannabis Enlightened with Dr. Leroy. The information presented in this podcast is not intended to provide medical or legal advice. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Before using cannabis or making any changes to your treatment, consult a qualified healthcare provider. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of OLOS Media or its sponsors.
OLOS Media.
This is Cannabis Enlightened with Dr. Leroy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Cannabis Enlightened. Welcome to another fantastic episode of Cannabis Enlightened. To my continuing audience and to new audience, thank you for listening and welcome again. As always, my podcast, Cannabis Enlightened podcast, are sponsored by March and Ash. You got to come to March and Ash if you're looking for quality cannabis. Once again, we're being broadcast from the OLOS Media studio and making sure that everything works right, everything looks good, everything sounds good is JC and Lena. Thank you very much. One of our newest assistant producers is with me today to assist as I talk to our guest, Mr. Mark Reyes, that I'll introduce in a minute. Arianna Salazar is going to assist me. And I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, although you probably won't see, because this is a podcast, that she is as beautiful as she is smart. So, don't be thinking because you hear, what she's saying, you're thinking to yourself, oh, yeah, well, she sounds good. Yeah, she looks good, too. So we're going to have her come on in a minute also. The guest that I have is someone that was brought to me by a really good friend. He is a gentleman that resides in North County.
Yes, sir.
Because we're in Mission Valley. So he resides in Escondido. And he has his own podcast in which he is the chief cook and bottle washer. He does everything. And I want the audience to know how important that is, because when I come in to do my podcast, I pretty much am told where to sit, are you ready, and go. That's what Lena tells me to do as my producer. But Mark does all of that himself. Mark Reyes from Escondido.
Hello,
I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's have you communicate with your audience, your listening audience, and to tell the Cannabis Enlightened audience, who you are and what's going on with you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me here first and foremost. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark. On social media, I'm at Puff Provisions Mark, and I'm one of 3 of your hosts at the Puff Provisions podcast. We've been streaming online for about 6 years, all your major platforms that you know of, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so on and so forth. And you can just visit us directly if you didn't know any clue whatsoever. Just go to puffprovisions.com and get sucked into our world right then and there. And it really is all about, in a nutshell, cannabis advocacy through a very unique lens of 3 fathers, dads, full-time desktop athletes, striving to figure out how recreational cannabis, emphasis on recreational, plugs into our modern-day world. Why do vape pens look like USB drives? Should I smoke it or eat it? What will my kids think? So it's things like that in our nature and our conversations where we do deviate, because obviously it's inferred that we're very much, on a flower or an edible, and those edibles do hit quickly. However, we wanted to take a firm stance after Prop 64 was baptized in 2016 to really take initiative in an effort for advocacy in our own way that was not typical of what we've seen up until now. And I guess what you could mean by that is the more traditional forms, and no disrespect whatsoever to what we grew up with in pop culture references. For example, Cheech and Chong, any How High movies, or, Friday with Ice Cube and Chris Tucker and things like that. And other ways through song and dance where it's, kind of implied about, cannabis and things of that nature. Knowing that.
How long, Mark, have you been doing your podcast?
Since 2019. Officially.
Okay.
Yeah. So like you said, I'm the cook, the dishwasher, and everything in between, the bookkeeper, audio, video, website, coding, everything, graphic design. Pretty much, in my view, specific to cannabis advocacy, there is no cost for me. I'm willing to go up to bat any given day of the week to talk about it, to think about it, to consume it responsibly, emphasis on responsibly, because we are in a generational moment where it's never going to happen again. And once we're out of it and we pass these decisions on to the next generation, it's my hope that everyone in this room and everyone listening made the right choice and made the right examples along the way for them to pick up and move forward with it. I'm not on earth for a long time. None of us are. So you might as well do some good with it and break any of those antiquated narratives that we inherited generationally, year over year, decade over decade.
Is the most recent podcast that you put out, what was that about?
It was, those are the more fun ones when we get to the burr months, like September, October, November. So that was a happy holidays one. Okay. Holidays one. But the one that I really wanted to bring forth and promote was interpreting Gen Z slang, which I'm very terrible at. I'm not part of that umbrella. Whatever demographic or you want to call it on Wikipedia, I'm not. And I was really testing myself alongside at Puff Provisions, Mike and Daryl, my two other colleagues that co-host with me, on could we really unfrack some of this cryptic semantics that I'm seeing in the modern day light. And I couldn't. I failed miserably. So
I'm glad you mentioned their name, because I was thinking that you talked about, two others.
Yes.
But if you didn't mention their names, I can imagine that once you get back to Escondido, they will be beating you on the head. Well, you didn't talk about me. You didn't say my name.
Oh, no. At Puff Provisions, Mike, at Puff Provisions, Daryl. That's how you can access us in our own unique ways. But again, if you forget everything, just go to puffprovisions.com. Everything is housed there.
Okay. So. Well, great. And I was thrilled to hear that there's somebody else doing, something similar to Cannabis Enlightened, interacting with the audience, talking about different topics that are cannabis related. So it's good to have you here. And
thank you very much.
I intend to hear a lot more from you as we continue into our topic. But right now we have Arianna Salazar, my assistant producer, who
hello.
I think is doing some different things right now, aren't you?
Yes.
Can you tell us what's going on with you right now?
Yeah, so I am a clinical herbalist at a movement hospital. It is a startup movement hospital practicing integrative wellness, orthopedic, physical therapy, a performance floor. We don't call it a gym, performance floor, and a nutritionist. We have a conscious chef. So basically bringing in, of the enlightenment of healing and natural medicine along with science in this space. And as a clinical herbalist, I love it because I have my own brand. It's Blissed Herbs. I have my own apothecary, so I make tea blends, candles, and I also do spiritual coaching, and it all kind of like synergizes together in the same thing, which is really fun. And I worked in the cannabis industry since 2016-17, so I've been very passionate about this plant and its healing modalities and how it's changed my life and others, and working in the retail side from the marketing, and now just specializing in herbology and botany, and really just standing in tune with this sacred indigenous medicine. Cannabis has had so much different effects on different people I've seen over time, even with my herbal client intake. And I really think this is a beautiful healing plant that has opened me up to so many different things.
I'm glad avenues like you exist, because we have to start thinking outside of what we've been taught, not to negate anything that's already been proven scientifically, but we have to realize that you have to expand outside of just traditional prescriptions and that orange bottle as the first, knee-jerk reaction approach, because there are qualities to life that we were taught or surrounded by, our resources and things of that nature, especially with, consumer packaged goods and, processed food and things like that, where it's really taken a hit. And this, transcends cannabis, obviously, but like knowing that these types of professions exist, like with you and with Dr. Leroy here and everything else in the surrounding cannabis context, it's important to always put it out there with honesty and decency, and yes, still express doubt, because we are in unforeseen territory at this time until Schedule 1 is totally eradicated.
Exactly.
Yep, you have a point.
Well, we're going to have a good discussion here this afternoon because we've got two people that are coming at it from similar but different points of view. Because what we're going to talk about is why cannabis users, why or how they deserve better representation or maybe even better cannabis, quality of cannabis, what cannabis is used for, what people use it for, what they could use it for. So why don't we open it up with you, Mark?
Sure.
What kind of cannabis do you think most people appreciate or want?
In all honesty, every age group, doesn't matter ethnic background, gender, any of that stuff, it's really stress relief after a hard days of whatever, of your daily life.
Okay.
And, everyone and anyone that's covertly spoken with me, because it is still, to some respects, in my inner circle, a quiet topic, not a shameful topic, but it's quiet.
Quiet because of what?
Quiet because it's still misunderstood.
Yeah.
It's not, okay, you and I could be at the happy hour right now and we could talk about the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That just recently happened. You and I could talk politics if we wanted to. We could talk about religion for crying out loud. That creates wars outside of politics. But cannabis, no one really brings that up unless you pull them to the side and say, hey, I've been taking this or I've been taking that. Is this CBD or whatever this case may be, or some new piece of vocabulary coming from the industry? Is this going to help me out with my ailment or with my stress? And it's really all about, in my view, not speaking in context to being a working professional or a consultant in the industry, just simply a recreational user. And at one point, I was a medicinal user when I could only get access that way through a medical card. Right. It really is stress. Now it's about modifying all that and saying, yes, of course, I support you if you want to use it, and you should still be empowered to say no. Just say no is still something that I am an ambassador of. Just not in the legacy context that it was driven with through the Reagan administration in the 80s. But you should still be empowered to be safe and say no if this stuff isn't for you. However, if you want to step through that door,
right.
I see that the law of averages at all time when I talk to a version of you or you in a more safe setting is it's just really stress relief after a long days of whatever in life.
Mark, do you think that's generational? Or
stress?
Well, the stress or the using of cannabis.
Generational for stress. The using of cannabis, no, because in this modern day context, which I'm still trying to inform myself on, there are so many ways to apply cannabis outside of flower. Now, when I grew up, and I'd like to think you and I specifically share this sentiment because that's all we knew. That was what I knew of: a dime bag, I knew of a gram, I knew of an ounce. I know how to measure that stuff, and that's the vocabulary and the context I would talk to. Yes, to be perfectly honest, before it was legal, that's how you would talk to someone who was in the know of that kind of stuff. And that was really the way to apply cannabis. Now, in the modern day sense, you could go down to the retailer over at March and Ash and similar dispensaries, and you have different ways of applying outside of just traditional flower. You've got the vapes, you've got salves, you've got
There's tinctures
and stuff like that, and that is way outside of my wheelhouse still because learning the efficacies of all of those, it's still very biased because scientific studies are very, very small still. Because again, I will say blame Schedule 1 for blocking the growth of this. But I think the generational part to your point and to your question is about application of cannabis versus stress, because every generation, doesn't matter if you're the boomers or if you're Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, or any of that stuff, we all are carrying a certain amount of lifestyle stress.
Yeah, true.
That stuff doesn't change. And, it's really about looking at these as either in the recreational context or the medicinal context, whatever the case may be. When you step through those doors, knowing that this is happening with cannabis, even though we're 9 years out from Prop 64 and many years out from the first Hemp Act, and it only being, what was it, Colorado and Washington State being the only legal states at that time.
In the beginning.
In the very beginning, right? We're way past that, but yet we're still sitting idle and static in a certain point in the year 2025.
I think we've got something like 37 states now
Right.
that have cannabis
Right.
legal, either between recreational or medical.
Right,
So-
right. And that's the thing. Like I noticed when we here in California voted yes for Prop 64 in 2016, that's when I really started to like passively take inventory and pay attention more to the current events specific to cannabis, irrespective of who was in house as president. I just wanted to take it year over year, and it built up year over year until 2019, where I was like, whoa, the voting context between state to state is really getting adopted. In orders of magnitude, it went from 2 states to like 8 states to now over 37 in just the blink of an eye, with only a slight halt in the last election cycle in 2024.
True.
And for those reasons, I could speculate all I want, but I don't know what really dialed the knobs for it to go no instead of yes to legalization in Florida and things of that nature. That's out of my wheelhouse, but it took me, when I was really carrying momentum and paying attention more to current events. When 2019 happened at the start of the Puff Provisions podcast, I said to my friends, I was like, something big is happening here, and it is our responsibility to do something about it, not just enjoy it. Of course I want to enjoy it.
It's
a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But there's a shift going on, and I cannot ignore this fact, because once it's gone and I pass it on to my children's friends, my friends' children, and my own children, my decisions that I make here today, like, are you safe, or at least are you at a better starting point than what we were? Because you and I, and you as well, were in a disservice from what we were taught.
You brought up something that I think Arianna can highlight in terms of application.
Okay.
You mentioned
Yeah,
application,
please.
which is different types
Yes.
of cannabis and different types of cannabis use.
Yes.
So, Arianna, as a herbalist, what other ways besides consuming would someone look at or use cannabis?
Topically. So basically salves or gels, people with arthritis pain, they have lidocaine patches in the pharmacy. So lidocaine is a form of relaxing the nerves and the muscles from, recovering through stress or an event or some type of injury. Cannabis, I actually do have a client who's interested, and he's a little bit of an older guy, and he wants to know more about what other options are there instead of muscle relaxers and Vicodin and lidocaine patches. And this is where I came into, have you tried topical cannabis products, a 1-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD, or they even have CBD patches.
Does the 1-to-1 ratio still make it psychoactive? Or
No,
is it
because
got
it's
it.
going through the body, through the skin,
Got it.
as opposed to the digestive tract. So,
Gotcha.
At the skin absorption, it goes through the fat cells in the blood. So you're
gotcha.
feeling those effects, as opposed to getting high off those effects.
But the onset would be more delayed, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Exactly. And then I had a question.
Sure.
So what does a better representation of a cannabis user look like to you?
Physically, it is probably I'll answer that question.
Yeah.
It is the most boring description, the most vanilla ice cream I could imagine, because that's who it should be for. It doesn't just have to be the one person that's peacocking in the room. It can be for anyone and for everyone if you're willing to open the door. Don't pull yet. Study first and understand before you make an informed decision. Because I do see cannabis and its value outside of just the pop culture references that we see on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's really, like, on a physical level. It doesn't matter. You could paint your canvas that way. It is boring. It is unsugared cornflakes. It is peanut butter without the jelly. That's how I look at it.
I think if you, and I've done this before because I visit a lot of the March and Ash dispensaries.
Oh, awesome.
In terms of just getting to know what's going on, you will find a lot of different types of people
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everywhere, all
that go
different
in and come out of a cannabis shop. I mean, if you had a thought in your mind that, oh, I'm only going to see, seedy looking people coming out of a cannabis shop. No. In the first place, most cannabis shops, the March and Ash cannabis shops, are very well decorated, bright.
Oh yeah, the retail design is on point.
It's tremendous. And then you'll see young, you'll see middle age, you'll see seniors.
Yes.
Because of some of the things that you had just mentioned, Arianna, that you can put it on your skin, or for arthritis or something like that. So
of course, like me, it's hard for me to break, things that I feel work for me. So I do, dive deep into flower and things of that nature. But I'm also timed with it too. I don't just puff on any part of the hour. That for me, and this is more of an emotional relationship that I have with it, or a sensical, practical, pragmatic relationship that I have with it, because I'm older now. I'm not 19 in the dorm. Okay, that's gone. That version of Puff Provisions Mark is gone. I'm older now, and I've refined it to being like, it is my version of red wine. Once the clock hits 8:30, okay, you can go ahead and do that kind of mentality. So I treat my usage as responsibly.
Boundaries and kind of having time frames with yourself, so you're building that respect with the plant.
Because I can't. This is one thing where I don't share in the philosophy. Like, I fail at wake and bake. It's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
So it's
okay when you say wake and bake.
Yeah, that cultural expression where the moment you wake up, you light one up, kind of mentality.
Okay.
And clever, cute, and stuff like that. And for those of you that it works for you, awesome. It fails for me, and I know not to do that. So, like, to your point, boundaries and setting those things. So those are other things as a recreational consumer and medicinal too, you've got to be aware of. At all times. And no one trains you or gives you a book on that. You just have to look in the mirror and be assertive of it. Yeah. And, if you have a highly addictive personality already, is cannabis appropriate for you? Toss-up question. You really have to answer that yourself.
Yeah. I'd say the same thing to a lot of people that, some people say, well, Dr. Leroy, do you think cannabis would be for me? I said, I don't know. Maybe you try a little.
Yes. Oh, yes.
You try a little and
Very good call. Very good call.
If you like it. I always tell them, try a little and wait.
I've gotten similar advice too, and it works. That is probably the most pragmatic way of thinking and approaching anything, including cannabis.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is to not even necessarily microdose, because you're not even there on that protocol yet. It's just, if you're in that curious phase, small is the best way, because if you go deep, it's unforgiving. And you don't want to have that negative impression, obviously. And also identify, what are you using it for? Like how you asked me earlier. It's like the stress part.
Exactly.
And things of that nature. And to your clients out there that are, in actual, medical ailments.
Yes. And
totally
I say
different.
with all plants, just from like an herbal perspective and understanding how plants affect the body, cannabis in kava, we have all these very strong plants that have very strong effects to the body really rapidly. So with anything, start slow and go. So when every time I tell people with certain types of herbal blends with lavender, or, can I mix this with this? I'm like, start slow. Everybody's body's different. Everybody's weight and absorption rate and tolerance is different. And so it's kind of understanding, if you can start slow, you're able to pace yourself and see those effects. And if you want more, you can add up. So
absolutely.
There's an appreciation that I've learned. Let's see what you two think of this.
Sure.
For cannabis, that's not just taking it in, but before you even take it in, the look and the smell.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Is something to be appreciated.
Oh, absolutely.
Based upon the strain.
I'm flipping on my vocabulary and what that is, but I know what you're talking about.
All the different appeals
the
of
earthy floral tone,
piney,
fruity, the pininess too. I just recently studied this, but forgive me. But yes, I do realize where you're coming from, and it's that level of detail you as a consumer, you don't know until you know. But it's important because of the amount of inventory that obviously the dispensaries are giving out these days. It's not just a bag of stress that you're getting for like $10 kind of mentality. You actually get to enjoy and appreciate the hard work that these cultivators have put through to create these types of buds off of these strains, whether, they're autoflower, they grew them from soil, and other techniques and things of that nature. But the more you see it, you're like, whoa, I didn't know there were this many arrangements that you could make of cannabis.
Yeah.
I didn't. What still gives me a hard time though is the names, because it's been peppered throughout the industry and misused all across the board, that I can't tell the authenticity of if it really is, Maui Wowie or not kind of mentality. That's a different story for a different day, but to your point, the scent of it all is really where like that triggers in a good way.
Yeah.
I'm using trigger as good vocabulary, not bad, in a good way. So if I were to tell that person that you were talking to start small, also smell it, give it a sense of refinement. Don't even consume it just yet. Just see where you are emotionally speaking relative to what your senses are telling you. And it helps.
And speaking of smell, when it comes to back to our topic of the stigma of the smell, so kind of like has that, the smell of weed in certain areas, or even when you're about to hang out or do something, has that affected you in your way, your family or community, or even?
Oh yeah, across the board. Now, if you were just speaking to me, myself, and I obviously have no problem with it whatsoever. I enjoy it. It's an abundant aroma, and even if I saw a guy or a gal, or I sniffed it across the street and I smelled that instead of something else, I'd be like, that person's putting themselves at peace. Kind of mentality. It's been a long day. I get it. It's exhale that moment.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Now, you're asking me about like the residual, like the people around me and things of like that, family and friends, community and things of that nature. That is where it's definitely a bit of a challenge. I myself, I know, without people ever standing up and saying it to my face or looking me in the eye and saying, hey, stop that. I know I'm sure it does have an off-putting effect to them. And that's where I flip the switch and go into vape mode quite a bit, or I go into edible mode if I really want to enjoy my night like that. But I know it is... How do I say this? When you consume specific strains through flower, obviously, and getting that quick onset, you'll notice that the aroma is different too on exhale. Like if you were to be in a room and it was this type of strain, and then you go into another room and it's this kind of strain, you'll notice that as well, where the aroma is completely different. So it's really what's less off-putting for you as a way to start looking at it. Do I have a life hack or a way to resolve for those around me that have a problem with the actual infectious odor of it? No, unfortunately I don't, except to say vapes are probably the only way to do it, because you don't smell it at all.
But I think there may be a reason for a way, not a reason, but a way for people to get around.
Oh, there are
drinkables.
There are drinkables. A fun one. One or two Christmas exchanges ago at Puff Provisions, Mike, or maybe it was Daryl that did it, gave me my holiday gift for that year, and it was one I don't know the brand, so I apologize, but it was a device, no bigger than our hand, and it was a filter. And you would exhale after consuming smoke, and it'd filter all of that stuff out. And I found that to be a really novel toy, device, peripheral, whatever you want to call it. And it worked. It was very, very non-offensive, or as close to being non-offensive, but it was ridiculous because I had to remember to bring it, or remember to hold it, or pair it to my stash kind of mentality. That's really the only homework assignment. And after a long day, it's like you just want to get there in as close of a straight line as possible after a long day. But yeah, those are the surrounding life hacks that I've been presented with.
I want to underline again for a lot of listeners that however you consume it, you got to consume a little bit at a time.
Yes,
and I say that because I think the drinkable.
Never had one, to be perfectly honest.
Really?
No.
The drinkable. Well, I've tried the drinkable before, and because it's drinkable, you have the tendency to maybe want to gulp a little bit more than you would normally do.
Is it
like you're drinking a soda?
Of an energy drink, or is it just?
They have like cans. They have lemonades. They have soft drinks. There's.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not foolish. I've seen them. I've just never bought them myself because my personal preference is flower.
They could be mixed. You can mix it, a drinkable with, let's say that's got, I don't know. They go anywhere from 2.5% THC to. I've seen some that have 100% THC.
THC
Oh,
or
wow.
like
Very
the
strong.
100 milligram.
Okay, that you need a microdose.
A
If it's
microdose.
100% THC. Okay.
A fun little tip. I make herbal mocktails already with
Okay.
like plants and like tinctures and elixirs with my cannabis ones and drinks and stuff. If I don't feel like consuming alcohol, I love making like a nice little concoction, but I'm dosing it. So I get like not the 100 milligram, but I'll get like a 50 or a 20 or 30, and then I'll pour some with ice and maybe some like ginger ale, maybe add some sweetener and some juice to it to make like a fun little cannabis concoction, I would call it. And that's kind of how you're pacing yourself and you're sitting and you're enjoying your drink as opposed to you grabbing the bottle and drinking it just like that. So it's a different experience and a different feel.
So what are the ratios? Like if we're talking mocktail, fun fact, I used to be a bartender. So let's see, vodka, lime cheese, triple sec.
You didn't tell us that before.
Okay.
Oh, it was a long
So
time
you
ago.
got-
This was pre-Great Recession.
You've got a lot of
2008.
careers in you, don't you, Mark?
Oh yeah, that was a fun one back in the gas lamp back in the day. But so vodka, lime juice, triple sec. The baseline of any kind of cocktail is 1 ounce of a hard substance, vodka, gin, rum, whatever. Are your ratios the same thing with the THC component? Do you put 1 ounce? Is it
Yes.
kind of mental? Okay,
I mean,
perfect.
you
one
can.
and a half, 2 ounces.
One and a half or two. I like to kind of start slow, and then if I feel like the drink needs a little bit more, because you could taste the THC in it, so you're like, this
How
is a
quick
little
is that
more.
onset?
I would say for me,
With bias, everyone listening.
yeah, for me, my
this
tolerance.
is not scientific evidence.
Yeah,
here.
it's not scientific evidence. It's just based on my own tolerance.
Yes.
30 to 45 minutes, sometimes an hour,
Okay.
depending on the drink.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
But that's still longer than
Yeah,
regular alcohol.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people,
But we're in mocktail mode, so we know
Yeah.
what we're getting into.
that's what people
Yeah.
measure.
Yeah.
Generally, that they'll take a shot of something or maybe a glass of wine. Sometimes people you mentioned that before. Maybe people drink a glass of wine a little quicker,
yeah.
and they'll feel that rush
Right.
a little sooner. But it takes a little bit longer.
But
I
remember,
would
it's a
say,
different
with cannabis.
context. That
Yeah.
glass of wine by itself, and you did it a little quickly, or did you pair it with your
Yeah.
meal? Completely different speeds.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you have to look at that. You really have to be knowledgeable.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm creeping into my my logo is my mantra is knowledge is power, but that's actually true. You need to gain some knowledge about cannabis, about edibles,
100% agree.
about smokables if you're going to do that,
Yes.
about the oils, about all of it before you use it. And I don't know about you guys, but I think some of the best teachers of that are the bud tenders or the concierge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they got their brains.
Slow play it and shake their hand and ask as many questions as you need. Because when legalization happened that many years ago here in California, I had a one-trick pony mindset about what I was going to do. It's either sativa or indica. I knew of like 3 or 4 different strain names, which, over time you tend to realize that those are just the names, but it's not authentic to the lineage anymore, and it kind of goes away. But ask those questions to your bud tenders. Slow play it because that's what they're there for. They're there to be your human resource to your choice of confection, if you will.
Even to the extent that you tell them what you might need it for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
We're going to put a pause in the conversation, and we'll be back right after this.
This is Cannabis Enlightened with Dr. Leroy.
Mixed Grounds Coffee, founded in 2020, is where culture brews community. Located in San Diego's Logan Heights district, this Vietnamese-owned micro-roastery brings you the world's finest beans, roasted in small batches. Mixed Grounds is proud to present I Just Wanted to Push Record on the Olas Media Network, celebrating arts, community, and culture.
When I wrote my book, The Insider's Guide, in 2019, I set out to demystify digital fundraising. Now, in 2024, I'm giving you access to some of those insiders and the world of nonprofit fundraising through my podcast, From the Nest with me, Charity Jen. Visit olasmedia.com and subscribe to From the Nest with Charity Jen, where fundraising takes flight.
Like we talk about in the show, there are a lot that goes into a successful podcast, more than just pushing record. Whether you're new or seasoned, if you're looking for someone to make your great show idea a reality, then we've got your back. Check us out at olismedia.com and see how we can help you push record on your next big project. Hey, let's pick up where we left off. Back to the show.
I have a little follow-up fun question.
Absolutely.
That ties into basically all of this with the cultural side of cannabis and our views on who consumes, what we consume, that stigma, right? How do we bridge the gap? What are your thoughts on how we can bridge the gap between legalization and true cultural acceptance?
Oh, sometimes they go together and sometimes they're very far different worlds. We'll go with legalization first.
Okay.
And this is a guy that's not a lawyer, by the way. Golly.
Oh, you're kidding. I was thinking.
I know. I
bartender,
threw a
webmaster, podcaster.
Cultivator.
Oh,
I just
see?
finished my cultivation certificate from Greenflower EDU. So
And you're going to try to make me believe you're not a lawyer. Huh?
maybe one day, but I hear passing that bar is really, really hard.
Yeah.
Ugh, no.
It's a process.
Respect to those of you that are lawyers, because that is definitely a thing. That is a profession in itself. But let's go legalization first, in that with it always sitting in Schedule 1, irrespective of who is the sitting president, it will not go anywhere. We're going to be stuck here. And that is the unfortunate truth. With it being there, you limit yourselves on the actual scientific studies that are abundantly out there. Mm-hmm. They just can't be done en masse and in practice at higher volumes than need be. Businesses such as this one can't benefit from tax codes like 280E, which allow you to have better tax deduction strategies with your businesses if you're related to cannabis, which is definitely not going to happen if you're in Schedule 1. Will it happen if you entertain Schedule 3 like it's been discussed last year in year 2024? I don't think so. Maybe not. Again, consult with your tax attorney. But I don't see any movement. It's going to be a local by local initiative, state by state initiative, community effort until it becomes Schedule 1. And that is how you initially bridge the gap, to your point in question, on how to do that. Because even trading, from my understanding from the things that I've studied, trading cannabis, actual legitimate cannabis products through state lines, that's not a clear line of sight. You can't clearly do that. Those mechanisms are either in their first drafts, experimental, or it's non-existent at all and totally illegal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So having that ability to trade with other legal states out there, obviously the 37 states that you say are out there, is darn near impossible. Yeah. At this time. So how are you going to scratch your back alongside your other industry peers' backs when you can't clearly trade properly? So it starts off small. Now on the cultural aspect that you're saying, how do you bridge the gap? It is through means like this, that what we were doing here, and not being afraid of it at all. And it goes back to your other point earlier about, what is your visual example of, I know I'm paraphrasing you incorrectly, but that visual and who you are as a cannabis recreational consumer. It is that boring person. It is everybody, everyday application that will start bridging the gap, because, all three of us in this room come from different perspectives, generations, and contexts, and cultural and ethnic values. Exactly. I know this already without knowing you guys that long. Yeah. But I know it's there. But carrying all of that together en masse outside of this room starts bridging that gap.
Yeah, like you said, community, using your voice, coming from that scientific standpoint, fact-based, or even just wherever you are in your profession on sharing how cannabis and had a positive impact in your life.
And the thing is, what as I deep dive further into the cannabis industry and study it more and report on it more, which I do have a weekly newsletter out, Puff Provisions Weekly. Subscribe to it if you'd like. That'd be great. We publish every Thursday, 8 a.m. Pacific. That being said, the more I understand and study this industry more with the facts being presented to me in real time, be at peace that the medical journals are there in volume and in density. It's out there. It's just there's no system out there for scientists, medical institutions to thoughtfully collaborate and scale all of that stuff out. fast enough. I'm putting the pressure on. Look here locally. I say hi to UCSD Cannabis Research Institute. I know they're here locally. I hope you guys can do something because it's definitely something where I don't have the capital or the tools to do so. I just have this, this steadfast attitude that I'll always support, like you here, and that's all I can do. But it really goes back to that part.
And we've talked about Schedule 1.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about a schedule a couple of times.
Yeah, federal
federal
scheduling.
Yeah, in our conversation, and I think most of our listeners, Cannabis Enlightened listeners, and your listeners at Puff, I think they know or understand that there is a schedule. FDA, the federal government, has a schedule in which they categorize all drugs.
Yes,
and unfortunately, cannabis is a Schedule 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I think our listeners probably need to do some research, because the knowledge, as I say, knowledge is power, to find out why cannabis is a Schedule 1 and why it takes such a bad rap.
So my quick cheat sheet in the advocacy would be this. If you really wanted to study it in comic book form, is a book called Cannabis, The Illegalization of Weed in America. Now, it's written in comic book form, so it's easy to digest. And it really taught me from the historical context, from the front to the back, starting from the origin story of where hemp was. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Starting from the origin stories to where a government official in the 1920s, 30s, Harry Anslinger, or whatever his name is. Yeah, really used the context, the ignorance, and things of that nature. Basically racism was part of it. Doubt, a lot of doubts in against Black culture and Mexican culture inundating America at that time, and using those assumed narratives to create government policy and his network with publications and things of that nature to really scale out the lies, which then peppered its way through generationally into the Nixon administration, to the Reagan administration, and so on and so forth. But that book was very easy to read, took me an hour, and I instantly became an advocate after that.
We might be able to add that in some of the credits as...
Yeah, again, I don't know who this person is. I enjoyed the book.
It says Smoking Out the Truth.
Looks very interesting.
And it mirrored very well because, my road to advocacy started from there, voting yes on Prop 64 and things of that nature. But pre-COVID, if you remember... Weed Maps had a display in Los Angeles called the Museum of Weed, and it took me through. Me and the boys went to it. It was a very well worth trip to the heart of downtown Los Angeles, and they rented out a space, and there were 13 exhibits starting from the origin story to where it's at now. So you went through these 13 different worlds about hemp and cannabis and things of that nature, and it really. It was consistent with what I've already read and what I've accumulated. And it just blew my mind open because they had not only the storytelling involved, but, some exhibits and hard facts and hard objects that were like associated with it. There was this one piece that I really, really liked. It was probably exhibit 1, 2, or 3 on the early historical context of hemp and things like that. That there was samurai armor made out of hemp. Now think of a samurai statue, and it's fully decked out, shoulder pads and helmets, and it's made out of hemp. And hemp is a very strong material. It's very stocky.
Thick.
It's not a leaf. It's not cute like that. It's very sturdy. And I'm like, wow, we really screwed the pooch on the narrative in this one.
Well, what happens generally in Cannabis Enlightened is when we really get moving, we're at the end.
That's fine. I was very happy to be here.
So Mark, any closing comments, and how can people, reach you?
Certainly. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me here, and I'd like to do it again sometime.
Sure.
If all else fails and you forget everything, puffprovisions.com. If you want to get me more personally, my handle is @puffprovisionsmark. All the handles out there in social media world is simply Puff Provisions. So stay tuned. I look forward to doing another indoor grow, which is something that I've been manifesting, but I have not pulled the trigger on doing it quite yet. And that'll be a fun one for me to chronicle and showcase out there to the world. And just for free, just to give you guys context on everything I have, like I said, advocacy has many paths, and I've been studying this on my own dime and on everything. and I took a recent agriculture and horticulture certification. So all of those notes are there for free, 17 articles on puffprovisions.com. It's a brand new category, a brand new section. So go ahead and enjoy. Learn the history and learn how to grow and all of those good things.
Well, great. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Arianna, any last comments for our listening audience? And once again, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so Arianna Salazar, you can follow me on Instagram at Arianna Salazar altogether, and my apothecary, if you're looking to dive deep into the herbal realm or have any questions on herbs like cannabis or more in general, is at Blissed Herbs, BLISSED, herbs with 2 S's. And I'm very appreciative of being here, and thank you so much, Mark, for coming out. And
Thanks
love
for having me.
your
Appreciate
insight
it.
on everything. And yeah, may this enlighten more people to be aware of what we share with the cannabis industry.
Sweet.
Well, thank both of you for being with us, being with the Cannabis Enlightened audience and sharing your wisdom, your experience about cannabis. And for the listening audience, you can hear this episode and all the Cannabis Enlightened episodes on either Spotify or Olus Media. I pretty much listen to all of it on Olus Media, but you can put in at Spotify, Olus Media, Cannabis Enlightened or cannabisenlightened.com. And if you want to reach me, you want to say, listen, Dr. Leroy, I like this, or I didn't like this, or hi, you can reach me at dr.leroy@cannabisenlightened.com. This has been fun being with all of you today and sharing our thoughts, and I look forward to being with you at our next episode. And remember, the only way to combat stupidity and ignorance is that knowledge is power. Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Thanks for listening to Cannabis Enlightened. Be sure to follow and subscribe whenever you listen to your podcasts. To read the blog associated with this episode, visit olasmedia.com. This episode was produced in studios located in San Diego, California and Tijuana, Baja California. Creative Director Ulises Breton. Sound Engineer Alan Glespar. Producer Lena Alvarez. Serving as Executive Producer and Co-Founder is JC Polk, and Chad Peace is President and Co-Founder. Olas Media is an IVC media company. Thanks for listening to Cannabis Enlightened. Be sure to follow and subscribe whenever you listen to your podcasts. To read the blog associated with this episode, visit olasmedia.com. This episode was produced in studios located in San Diego, California and Tijuana, Baja California. Creative Director Ulises Breton. Sound Engineer Alan Glespar. Producer Lena Alvarez. Serving as Executive Producer and Co-Founder is JC Polk, and Chad Peace is President and Co-Founder. Olas Media is an IVC media company.
Olas Media.